Hey, welcome to Epilogue. Thanks for joining us. On this episode, Russell and I are going to talk about Genesis 1 and 2 together. And when you read them, they're very different. And so we're going to talk about some of the challenges and discussions around that, and then some of the options for how to look at those two chapters together. So I hope you enjoy this episode. Thanks again for joining us. Russell, it's good to see you again, man. We took a week off last week. We had Nate on here, which was awesome. Just talk about creativity and all that good stuff. But we are going to dive today back into Genesis, particularly a little deeper into the text. We have been working our way through Genesis 2 on Sunday mornings. Actually, this past Sunday, we took a week off.
It's baptisms. It was great.
Awesome Sunday just to celebrate new life in Christ and these people that want to follow Jesus and go public with that. So pretty awesome, great Sunday of celebration. And this week we're getting back into Genesis 2.
Yes.
And super excited about where we're going this week, but I won't play all those cards right now because we want people to, it won't be a surprise. So, so today, I think one of the questions, I think you mentioned it came up in your small group. I'm sure other people are asking the same question is, you're reading through Genesis 1 and 2, and you go through Genesis and man, it's just got this really clear, like structure, day one, day two, and it was evening, there was morning, there was evening, and it's a repetition of words and phrases. Let there be, and there was, and God called, and it was good. And so this orderly pattern that kind of represents the order and function that God's bringing to creation. And so it's very neatly organized. And then you get to chapter 2, and it just reads very differently. It lacks some structure. It doesn't have that same kind of repetition or as much repetition that chapter 1 has. And so they look very different. And not just in a literary style or format, but like in terms of like the chronology of like the order of creation seems different. And so this raises problems for people, and they go, man, like these are like two different accounts. Like this doesn't make sense. And so I thought it'd be fun to explore that a little bit and just talk about the kind of the different takes on how they relate to each other. And so don't know if you have anything to add to that before we dive in, but just some of the problems that are there.
I mean, you nailed it. For us, I think in our current culture, when we start a book, we like it to just be normal, logical, sequential. It reads like a typical narrative. I think our chapter breaks and verse divisions don't help us a ton here.
No.
I think chapter 2 verses 1, 2, and 3 should be with
chapter 1.
Yeah, chapter 1. So I think
who can you write a letter to about that? I mean,
exactly.
so like
I think they're set. So I think we're just gonna have to deal with them. So and just to make sure we're all clear, like those chapter breaks and verse breaks aren't in the original text, and so the guys, I mean, they did the best they could with what they knew.
Absolutely.
And so it's not like it takes away a ton, but they are unfortunate because it chapter 2, 1 through 3 should go with chapter 1, at least in my opinion. And then you get chapter 4. And so as you're reading it, it just doesn't seem to make a ton of sense. And then, like you said, you have some things being made that we thought were already being made. You've got man, and then you've got the specific of like Adam, and then, a rib, and like where was all of that in chapter 1? And so people ask this question. It came up in my small group because people reading this would have a lot of these kind of sequential questions. It doesn't seem to make sense. And the underlying question in this is, does this somehow invalidate God's word?
Absolutely.
And so
I'm not saying it absolutely does, but that is the underlying question. And and it's interesting as you start digging on this, and there are a lot of people that invalidate God's word simply based on this. And they're like, hey, you start at the beginning, and and critics are going, there's problems. Like starting in the very beginning, there are problems, and so it's led many people to question the reliability of Scripture. It's led even some believers to abandon the faith because they go, I can't make sense of this, right?
That's right.
Obviously, there are other factors at work when that happens, but
lots,
But yeah, it's tricky, and it's and people deal with it in different ways, and they reconcile it in different ways. And one of those ways to reconcile it is to go, this doesn't make sense, So that's option number one.
It's devastating, right? At this point, really, what the reality is if we put so much of that weight on how Genesis 1 and 2 not just jive with each other, but with creation and the fossil record and whatever else. What people have done is they've tried to make Christianity a house of cards, and with Genesis 1 and 2 being that bottom set, and if I pull that card, then everything falls.
Right.
And unfortunately, that I don't think our faith doesn't need, number one, it's not a house of cards, and number two, it's not built on the relationship between Genesis 1 and 2.
Right.
And then the piece of it, like you said, so much scholarly work, secular and theological and biblical, has gone into trying to answer these questions. And I have watched students of the Bible walk away from normal evangelical faith, or normal evangelical beliefs, starting with some thoughts here, and maybe we can get into some of that here in a moment. But it's I don't think we can stress enough. Our faith is based on an empty tomb.
That's right.
Jesus came out of the grave, and how Genesis 1 and 2
connect to each other.
Listen, man,
that's not what it all hinges on.
No, Jesus died on a cross, was buried. 3 days later, he rose again, and he paid the penalty for sin and death. And so, man, that's what my faith is hinging upon. And there's no house of cards there. So anyway, I feel like I need to say that every time we get into these kind of things, because I want Christians to know that's what your faith is on.
That's important. I mean, we did baptism Sunday, and everybody talked about the gospel, what Jesus had done. Nobody talked about that connection to Genesis 1 and 2. That's not a part of my testimony. I don't know many people that's like, that's when it,
And I have no doubt that there are geologists and scientists of all kinds of fields who have seen God's handiwork and been amazed by it, and seen his testimony in creation, because creation is testifying to his hand. And because of their open heart to see that, it then drew them to the text, and they got to see the deeper truths, the special revelation of Jesus Christ. So I don't want to say that there's not any tie, but man, that these kind of debates really are secondary, tertiary, whatever, to our faith.
And you're right to say, like, we don't want to dismiss it and say, like, no, none of this matters, right? No, like,
it matters.
It matters, and it's important. I think it's important to talk about. That's why we're devoting a podcast to it, just to kind of talk about what some of those options are, to connect the two, and actually, like, how a couple of those options could bring some new things to life and help us understand it in a really life-giving and practical way. And so probably the biggest hang up for a lot of people is the chronological order of events, right? So in places like it almost seems contradictory even. So like Genesis chapter 1, you've got kind of in this order. I'm talking about these specific things that seem out of order. But Genesis 1, you have the plants created first, the animals, and then man and woman, right?
Yep.
Then Genesis 2, you have the man, and then you have plants, and then animals, and then the woman. And so it's like, wait, I thought that man and woman were at the end of all that. And Genesis 2, it seems like man's at the beginning, and then woman comes after. And so, and then you've got, chapter 1, the animals are presented before man, or sorry, God created animals before man. Chapter 2 says the animals
presented to him.
Are presented to him. And so, that gets confusing.
Absolutely.
You read that and you're like, wait, this is what's happening here.
I thought male and female were created on day 6, but then we have a man
and then plants and then animals. It's confusing. So
absolutely, yeah.
And so people are they're going, man, these seem like two different accounts, right?
Yeah.
And so that first idea of just rejecting it altogether is one option. Another option is, some people think these are two different stories by two different authors, right? Like, and somehow they were added to the Bible. An editor might have redacted them and combined them in some way, but that I don't lean toward that option. Just letting you know, but like, I don't know if you want to talk about that one at all. But
some of it's maybe less about of authors and more sources. Yeah. So I remember going to college and it's called the JEDP theory, and I was shocked that it was kind of this normal thing that was taught. And I of course, I grew up in a Baptist church. I never heard none of this, right? I just like Moses wrote the first 5 books. It's kind of what the text says. So, we should be good with it. And then to explain these variances, it's like, well, this clearly looks like 2 different sources. And so this must be a priestly source. This must be a Deuteronomic source. This must be an Elohim or a Yahweh source. And so you get some of that with the Elohim source in chapter 1 because it's just Elohim. And then you get the Yahweh source, which is heavy in chapter 2. And so you have 2 different sources, and that explains it. But if that's the case, then that's where the house of cards begins to crumble.
Absolutely.
Because it's claiming one author, and in that one author, then, well, it doesn't look like one author. And so now all of a sudden my Bible is not true and coherent, and then the dominoes fall from there.
Yeah, and even within that viewpoint, there's like a spectrum, right? Because there's some people that are like, these are different authors saying very different things, right?
Yeah.
There's probably another end of the spectrum where some people think like this is similar to like maybe gospel accounts, right? Where you've got different authors looking at something from a different angle and maybe have a different agenda is too strong of a word, but a different purpose in writing it, right? And so maybe a different, like a theological viewpoint they're trying to get across. So you have 2 different names for God, and chapter 1's Elohim, chapter 2's Yahweh. You talked about that on a Sunday. I think the last sermon. And so it's like this 2 different authors or 2 different sources, like you said. Theory is one theory, right? And
there are a lot of Bible believing conservative evangelicals who don't shy away from the sources. Like it doesn't mean for them that somehow this takes away from Moses and his authorship. It may just be that he was the primary editor and contributor and putting it together. And so there's a way that is not like this demon. Like when I say JEDP, a lot of people are like, oh man, you got to throw all that away. I think it has some roads you got to be really careful with, but there are some normal Bible believing scholars that just say, hey, that could be a possibility. We don't know. Maybe Moses took some different sources and pieced them together. I don't know. So that is one option.
Yeah. Okay. Option 2. And I've got a few options. You may have more in your head. I don't know, but I've got a few.
I bet we've got the same ones.
Okay. Yeah. So option 2 would be, chapter 1's this broad overview of everything, and then chapter 2 kind of zooms in. The zoom in option is what I'm going to call it, right? There's probably a more technical name. You came up with JD something P. So there's probably a technical name for this, but I'm calling it the zoom in option. So I don't know if you want to talk about that a little bit, but
that one is kind of twofold. One is that the zoom in is specifically day 6. And so we're zooming in, and we're zooming in on day 6. And so that's the reason why it feels out of order. But in reality, we're just focusing on that. Which I know good Bible believing teachers that teach that and uphold that. Some guys that I love and respect and sit under their teaching, that's kind of the view that they take. And I think it makes a ton of sense with the text to say, hey, I think we're zooming in here for a closer look. And again, that is, I think really that's trying to manage the tension of one source.
Yeah.
So if this is one source, then that's what this one source or this one author was trying to do.
Yeah. Expand on this day.
That's right. Yeah. And so from that standpoint, I think it's good. There's another larger zoom in that people would say, hey, I don't know if we're zooming in on a specific day.
Yeah.
The caveat to that would be is if there's a zoom in option A, zoom in option B would be we're zooming in on humanity.
Yeah.
And so in chapter 2, verse 4, when you have the switch of earth and heaven and earth, and then you have, this is the account or the Toledot, that Hebrew word shows up 10, 11 times in Genesis, and every time it's marking a short narrative and a genealogy. And so here it's like, okay, here's the Toledot, here's the generations of, and now we're having it of man. And so the focus, the zoom in is from heavens now to earth.
Yeah.
And this is our focus on God working through humanity. Now, that's kind of the way I view the zoom in.
Yeah.
I think it's less about day 6 and more about, we've seen God, transcendent creator, doing his thing. And now let's look at how he's going to do his thing through humanity.
Yeah.
So that I'm kind of the zoom in B version.
Yeah. That's actually what I would lean toward as well, because I think, you get this, you've talked a lot about like identity in this and like these big questions of like, it's not about like what is man, but who is man? These are big questions. What's my purpose? And so it's like you get all this like cosmic order and function up here.
Yeah.
And you get the grand name of God, Elohim. Yep. And then chapter 2, it's human focus and you get the personal covenant name of God, Yahweh. And so it is, it goes from this grand, like sweeping visual to zoom in on this very personal relationship with humanity. So I like that. I like that viewpoint that this is a zoom in and focus on humanity and God's. It's a little bit of where we're going this Sunday. This
absolutely,
idea of intimacy and
very much so. Yeah.
And so it zooms in on that and God's relationship and care and for humanity and how he wants them to function in this order and function on a grand scale. And so
and to participate in that.
And to participate. Hey, what's your role in that in the Garden of Eden? And and so I'm very comfortable with that viewpoint. I love thinking about that and just that flow to this focus on humanity and God's care there. So cool. Is there a third option?
There's probably a couple of other ones. The other ones, a lot of them being around the literature piece. So you have more of a poetic piece of it.
Sure.
Which you talked about.
The repetition and
a lot of that. And then you hit the narrative piece in Genesis 2. And so again, that's what people would say, hey, maybe you have two different sources.
Yeah. So that's the literary focus, less about the chronology. And
that's right.
Yeah. So.
That's one. There's another one that I think is pretty compelling. I don't know how, I haven't done a whole lot of reading on it, but I do think it's pretty interesting in that it's Genesis 1 is the ideal state. So, and when I say Genesis 1, I mean including the first 3 verses of chapter 2. So this rest, this was how God was going to settle in, and this is what it was going to be like. It is the ideal. And then Genesis 2 starts the reality. And so it is interesting to me. And they talk, when you have people who lean toward this ideal versus reality state, they would talk about like Psalm 8 as a place where we get another ideal. It's creation language, and it's this ideal creation language. And we look at it and say, man, Genesis 1, that didn't happen. Genesis 2, or Psalm 8, like this person that actually is the ideal of this, that didn't happen. I'll read it to you, just because I thought it might be interesting to just hear the language
of Psalm 8. Yeah.
Yeah. So he says, "O Lord, our Lord, how majestic is your name in all the earth, who have displayed your splendor above the heavens. From the mouth of infants and nursing babes, you have established strength because of your adversaries to make the enemy and the revengeful cease. When I consider your heavens, the work of your fingers, the moon and the stars, which you have ordained, what is man that you take thought of him, and the son of man that you care for him? Yet you made him a little lower than God. You crown him with glory and majesty, and you make him to rule over the works of your hands, and you put all things under his feet, all sheep and oxen, also the beasts of the field, the birds of the heavens, and the fish of the sea, whatever passes through the paths of the sea. O Lord, our Lord, how majestic is your name in all the earth." So you hear the creation language in God creating, and then there's this man, which we know who that is.
Yeah.
But in Psalm 8, it's like no one did that.
Yeah.
That's like ideal again. There's only one man who's going to do this perfectly. And what's interesting about the view is Hebrews 2, Psalm 8, and it's in reference to Jesus Christ. Yeah. So Christ clearly fulfills
He's the ultimate.
This. And so if Genesis 1 is the ideal, and here's the reality, and then we have this Psalm 8 is the ideal, pointing back to Genesis 1, and then here's Jesus saying, I mean, he is the one who is ideal, and he's going to bring the ideal back. Yeah. I find it pretty fascinating. That makes that brings a true cohesion to all of the word, not just Genesis 1 and 2. So anyway, I hadn't done a ton of reading on it, but I think it's...
I mean, I guess within that, you'd say, hey, this is actually the ideal purpose for which we're created.
Yes.
And we've gone a long way from that, but Jesus is the ultimate man, that restores us and eventually will bring that ideal back. And so,
it's interesting. I do think if you think about it in terms of ideal in reality, like you read Genesis 1 and you're like, man, that'd be great.
Yeah.
And then when you get to chapter 2, you're like, yeah, here we go. I mean, you can kind of feel it.
It's
These trees and a choice. I mean, the tension is rising at this point.
You get to chapter 3 and it's like, oh, there it is.
Yeah. So anyway, fun.
That's cool. Yeah.
Those would be I think those would be the big ones. I'm sure there's some others that some guys have that I hadn't read, but
anyway. That's cool, man.
Yep.
Yeah. I love it, man. Well, you've been trucking through Genesis 2. I know this is even though we're devoting the whole fall to Genesis 1 through 3.
Yeah,
man, there's a ton there that we'll just never be able to get to. And so I wanted to see, like, 2 weeks ago, you dove into chapter 2, and anything that you didn't get to, anything that you're like, man, I geeked out over this and I just didn't have time for it. So
a ton of stuff. There's, I mentioned in passing that there's no way that we would have time to figure out where these 4 rivers are. 2 of them are pretty easy on the map. 2 of them are pretty hard. So that would have been, that's a fun discussion. There are people who've really tried to...
there's some archaeologists out there and stuff that, like, I think I found them, and it's like, I don't know.
But. I'm not smart enough for all that. And I don't know, when you think about a catastrophic flood, how waters are rerouted and all of that. I think it's a fascinating conversation. I don't, there's some people that may want to just make the Garden of Eden just a symbolic kind of a place, and I think there's that's fine, but I think it's a place, and
physical place,
and these rivers, it's just what they knew, and those rivers reaching to the 4 corners of the earth, that what they knew at the time, and so, I have no doubt in my mind that there are these beautiful rivers flowing, and so anyway, it would have been fun to, talk about that, and you see some of the maps and the people, the archaeologists and the guys who've really gone hard after what these possible rivers could be. anyway, I'm just not smart enough to wrap my head around all of that.
But it's fascinating, man. And that's a deep rabbit hole you could go down, which is
oh my goodness, yeah.
Hours of entertainment there.
Yeah. Or torture, one of the
torture,
two. Depending on what it is. Something else that I thought was intriguing to me, especially when I thought about the beauty of the garden. The word garden that's used here in Hebrew in chapter 2 is, I mean, it's just a word that's translated for fenced in area, vineyard, garden, you know, all the things that you would think in terms of just normal, agricultural type of things. And then, I don't even know why I really, I just was thinking it'd be interesting to know what that Greek word is for the Septuagint. So the Septuagint translates the Hebrew text to Greek. And it's just always helpful to kind of see how some of these words have been used for thousands of years. And the word that the translators use for the Septuagint is paradiso, which is paradise. And it's used every time in chapter 2.
Yeah.
And I was like, okay, man, these people clearly had in their mind that this wasn't just some place with some nice plants. Like, this had a transcendent beauty, and it was something amazing and special.
Yeah.
And so I when I was looking, I was like, in the New Testament, where does that word paradise show up? And there's the part where Jesus is on the cross and he looks at the guy and says, "Today you'll be with me in paradise," which is clearly a transcendent place. Paul says he was caught up into paradise, and he actually refers to himself, I think, in third person or something. I know him, man. And then in Revelation, I believe it's 22, where it says there's this tree of life will be in the paradise of God, talking about the garden. And anyway, I thought, man, for them to use that word, they clearly were interpreting the Garden of Eden as more than just a physical place. They were interpreting it as a place where heaven and earth, where God was with people. And I thought that was super cool.
That's fascinating.
You can't, I mean, there's always the danger of translations and all of that. But it is pretty cool to see how they viewed the garden.
Well, and clearly, I mean, you can read it and see that it's a paradise. Like, contextually, man, like, they're reading it in the context going, this is a paradise, right? Like, and that word just made sense. And it's like, hey, this is God is there. It's beautiful. It's peaceful. This is paradise, you know? So
anyway, it was fun for me. There are times when you kind of get those little nuggets and you're like, yeah, that's pretty stinking cool. So
that's cool, man.
I think probably the other one is, which we've kind of alluded to with the chapter 2 stuff, is people get, when they get all bent out of shape on the chronology, was mankind made? And so a lot of humans were made in chapter 1. And then in chapter 2, do we just zoom in on, Adam and Eve?
Yeah. So the question is, were Adam and Eve the first humans, or were they part of the first batch of humans, I guess?
Who knows, right? Because they were taken and put in the Garden of Eden. So does that mean there were some others that weren't in the Garden of Eden? Anyway.
A lot of people had that question. I remember it wasn't too long ago, somebody said, hey, like, gosh, you get over to like chapter 5 and 6 and there's a bunch of people. How are there that many people?
So anyway, I don't know if I got a ton of answers, but there are as many options as trying to figure out Genesis 1 and 2. So some of those options explain that same thing. So if you're zooming in and you're really zooming in on day 6, then Adam and Eve are your original humans and you don't have a problem. If you're zooming in and you're talking about mankind and that's the focus, then again, Adam and Eve can be the first people made. People want to, from there, I mean, we know there's all kinds of thoughts on the origin of man and which ones are the first ones or not. And so, anyway.
Yeah.
I don't, man.
You're like, I don't have an answer for that.
At this point, I believe that Adam and Eve were real people in a garden created, and God put them in there to rule and have dominion. And man, Jesus, when you talk about his genealogy in Luke, it goes all the way back to Adam and Eve.
Yeah.
And so for me, like, I'm good. I don't know if I need a bunch of other stuff. I think when that genealogy puts it there, then it makes it pretty simple for me.
Yeah. Yeah. That's where, for me, even with Eve being created out of Adam, that to me has some major significance too, you know? Yes. So I'm like, that's highly significant. And
yes.
So I'm personally going to lean toward them being the first humans, and but there are a lot of other theories out there,
ton of them.
Yeah. So.
And again, there's some great Bible believing guys who love Jesus who would fall on a couple of those deals. There are some guys who would obviously be incredibly critical of the Bible and Jesus who would believe in some other ones as well. Yeah. I think it's one of those nice things to say, as long as we recognize the image of God.
Absolutely.
We recognize, I think to your point that the beauty of Eve being made from the rib or the side of Adam, like those, there's something really important there. They were naked and unashamed for a season. Those things are significant, and the text makes it clear about that. And I think those themes run throughout our Bible. Outside of that, man, I think we can be pretty open-handed on some things. Anything that starts to mess with the image of God or some of that intimacy, then I think we got to say, hey, I don't think that lines up here.
Yeah, so that's good.
Anyway,
those are some good parameters to draw on it, man. I think
got to have some guardrails.
That's right. That's right.
Go crazy.
You never know where you're going to end up. So
no doubt.
Cool.
Doubt.
Well, man, super helpful. I enjoyed this conversation, and hopefully it's helpful to you watching or listening. And thanks for talking about that, Russell. And
honored.
Thank y'all for joining us, and we'll see you next time.